are now, our webinars that are recorded are now being placed on TAASA's YouTube channel. So you can access all the webinars that we have recorded in the past year or so through the YouTube channel. This one should be up in a matter of 10 business days or so. So I thank you. So I want to say, as some of you know and some of you don't, that TAASA is the the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault. We say Stop TAASA, and it is a statewide agency, advocacy organization that works to address and eliminate sexual assault through public policy, training, prevention work, and support to programs that serve survivors of sexual violence. TAASA is not a direct service agency. We support those that do the direct service. We also like to say that TAASA is a unifying voice to eliminate sexual violence in Texas. And as the statewide coalition of rape crisis centers, advocates, survivors, and other allies, we are committed to fostering a culture that respects the fundamental rights and dignity of all Texans and, quite frankly, all humans. Okay. So I'm moving forward. Okay. All right. All right. I was asked several times in the recent past, how does an advocate establish rapport with a traumatized survivor? And it took me for a loop. And I started to ask questions, and then I was challenged to create such a training. And I had to take several steps back. It's like, how did I learn? Who taught me? And I was horrified, just horrified to realize that the way I learned was totally by trial and error, that I made some very, very bad mistakes with survivors at very, very vulnerable points in their lives, and that establishing rapport is a very soft skill. And how does one do that, especially with people who, as you know, who are doing social media and talking social media talk, and it's like another culture, another language. What do we do? So it's a combination of skills I'm gathering, and I'm going to ask for people to tell me what they do, what they know. I know that webinars aren't exactly interactive, but I really would like to get that, because this is not cookie cutter. This is, everyone has their own style, and there's no one right way to do this. It depends mostly on the advocate themselves being comfortable with who they are and the job that they're doing, the confidence level. I'm going to provide a few quote hacks and some documented information that I found. I want y'all to take it and make it as your own, because that's more important to me than anything else. That what our advocates get, what our survivors get, is good business. Okay, so the first thing I thought of was, if I'm attending a friend's wedding and I'm seated at a table where I don't know anyone, has that ever happened to anyone? You're going to some formal event and you're seated at a table and you don't know anyone at that table? How do you go about talking to your table mates? What do you do? Do you eat in silence? Do you try to change tables into where you know somebody else? Are there rules, or do you have your own rules surrounding this? And how do you act? Knowing that you're going to do this, do you consult an etiquette guide? Do you talk to your friends and families? You know, what happens when you go somewhere and you don't know anyone and it's a joyous occasion? And I guess the point is, how do you expect the other guests to act? And we're not meeting our survivors for the first time under joyous occasions. Okay, let's say you're going out to eat. What protocols do you follow then? Do you Are they different protocols for going out if you're just going for fast food or a cafeteria? You have a different way of interacting with people if you're going out with your friends or your extended family, or, you know, just general rules. I mean, I have rules in my family when we eat dinner anywhere. And that is, you don't talk with your mouth full. You don't interrupt folks. You don't bring your phone or your tech devices to the table. We sit there and we act. Do you sit in a particular place, or do you want to sit in a particular place? And what does that depend on? Because of my training and where I've worked over the years, I always want to see who is coming at me. So I've got my face fronting out, especially in a restaurant, to see the comings and goings. That's just important to me. I want everybody that I'm with when I go out to eat to have a positive dining experience. And that just doesn't include the people I'm going out with. It also includes the wait people who are serving us. And I'm guessing that that's true of most people. Do you think that the survivor, when we meet them for the first time, has any kind of choice in any of this? And or maybe they came from a situation like this. This is going to be hard. All right. Okay. So that's what we do next. Okay. What about this? This is an exam room. It's a forensic exam room. All right. How does that strike you as opposed to this? That too could be triggering for both people. And I'm gonna tell you my own personal opinion on this. Okay, if you were a victim of rape, if you are a victim of rape, which room would you prefer? And look at these rooms for a minute and place yourself in a survivor's frame of mind. Which one do you find the most soothing? All right. In my opinion, they both scare, and some are going to say to the left and some are going to say to the right, and there's no one right answer here. But I'm going to tell you, in my opinion, they both scare the bejesus out of me. And here's why. We know that most people who are raped by acquaintances, and they're raped generally in their homes. What if it happened in their bedroom and they walk into the forensic exam room and this, what they're seeing is the picture on the left, and they're freaking out? How do we know this? How do we know this? You know? Or what if they've been forced and held down, maybe gang raped, wherever it happened to be, and people had to have their legs spread, and the survivor had their legs spread apart, and now they're coming in and they're looking at this chair that's going to go down a little bit, and they're going to have to put their feet in the stirrups, and their legs are going to be spread, and they're freaking out. Does this not add to their trauma? Okay? I have no solutions to offer here, but to be aware that the survivor has an experience that we're walking in, that the survivor has an experience that we don't know anything about when we're walking into it. And when we are walking into it and we notice something, our job as advocates is to be trained on that survivor. And we're going to move that. Okay. We're going to move that forward in a minute, because the next one is, okay. All right. These are police interrogation rooms. They shouldn't be. We shouldn't call them interrogation rooms. Just an aside, do y'all know the difference between interrogation and interviewing skills? Okay. Interrogation is what law enforcement is supposed to do with the perps, with the suspects. It means they have the information, they know the answer, and they're trying to trap the perp in a lie. That's what that is. They forget that when they're talking to survivors. Interviewing is about a conversation back and forth to get at information. Okay, that's the difference. And again, there's no right or wrong here. Some law enforcement agencies are still using the interview room to the left, which is an interrogation room, which means something totally different to law enforcement than it does to advocates and to survivors, as opposed to the interview rooms. And you can see it where it says interview room, and it's a little bit more inviting. But again, when we're working with a survivor and they're going to be interviewed by law enforcement, and let's say they were raped in a den or study or their living room, the interview room may be triggering. And that is something that we need to be very, very aware of. Okay. The other thing I want to talk about is the differences in response to family violence and sexual assault. I'm not going to go on to my platform here, but I think we should never, ever, ever call it domestic violence, because there's nothing domesticated about it. It is violence within the family, so I call it family violence. And family violence codes are written in the civil law, inside of the civil law. They are all misdemeanors. Sexual assaults are written in the criminal code, so they are mostly felonies. The first responders for law enforcement, who are the patrol officers, are the ones who investigate. In sexual assault, the patrol officers may write up a report, but the law enforcement and detectives are the ones who are going to investigate, and they're going to depend a lot upon what comes out of the forensic evidence that is gathered. Prosecution generally does not need victim participation with family violence. The prosecution with a sexual assault almost always requires victim involvement. Medical's not involved in family violence, not usually. Medical providers to collect forensic evidence is almost always involved with sexual assaults. Family violence cases may have shorter disposition times, whereas in criminal law, the cases have a much longer disposition time. And anybody who's done this work for a while knows that it can take years before a sexual assault even goes to court, okay? And if first responders are going for a family violence call, very rarely is the sexual violence comes to light. It's hidden underneath the family violence. Advocacy in both cases can be immediate and long-term, and to address the unintended consequences. Advocacy, again, for sexual assault is to believe in Ham's reporting for the victim. So, to get information to further victim advocacy across systems. So we have that going on as well. Is this not everything we also need to tell the survivors at this point in time? And how much information of this can survivors literally take in when they're in crisis mode, when something immediately bad has just upside down their world? So the first task in a successful interpersonal relationship is the attempt. And I'm going to say that I believe in my heart of heart that the attempt is felt to build the relationship, okay? But a task also indicates that it's a piece of work, that it's something to be done or undertaken, and a responsibility that we have. So it's not the survivor's job to create the relationship with the advocate. It's the advocate's job to try to do this work with the survivor. When we go and we walk in for the very first time, we meet that survivor. We are bringing with us as advocates all that we are and all that we know. And that also is true, not just in our roles as professionals, but it also means in our personal as well. We have our opinions, and this is where it gets sticky. In our private lives, we get to pick and choose whom we wish to build rapport with. And those who don't fit into our definition of of what an interpersonal relationship means, we can disengage from them. That's not so in our professional lives. We're here for the long haul if the survivor wants us to be. And it's not about liking or not liking the survivor. It is about the professional advocacy role we are going to fill for them. We don't have the privilege of saying, no, thank you. You don't meet my definition of someone I care to have a relationship with. That would be devastating. And if you feel that way, then maybe this isn't the job for you, just saying. But I can assure you that the advocate, that the survivor can sit up in bed and think, geez, I hear that Wendy is the best advocate in the world, and she is working nights this week. Let me go out and become a victim. I don't think that happens. We're there not by choice. Survivors' choices have been taken away from them in the moment. So, how do you make it clear when you walk in and you are not the first person on the scene and you've had law enforcement, EMTs, and sometimes even forensic examiners talking to the survivor first and telling them who they are and what they do? How do you make it clear that you are not part of a system, that you are there merely for them, and that's what you can do? Because as an advocate, your job is not to be cold and clinical and distant. It's about having great boundaries, knowledges of local resources, and when to step up and when to step back. So I want to ask you, does this change the way that you would define advocate or advocacy? You want to include now rapport in advocacy? Because how you define it is going to be big. It's not that you are just an ally. Advocate is not a noun, it is an action. It's the process of forming an ongoing alliance to further the survivor's empowerment, to be their voice when they can't voice. And all of this is ongoing, it's fluid. Survivors change, their resources change, and whether we as advocates want to or not, we have to pivot with them. Okay, so the dictionary definition of rapport is it's a state of harmonious understanding with another that enables greater or easier conversation. As when I was talking with other people about how do you establish rapport, one of them said it should be effortless. That's often how friendships and personal relationships are built, but how effortless is it to build a relationship with the survivor who is in the hospital, who has just been raped immediately thereafter? So building and developing and finding common ground, that's the emotional connection and the bond that's going to make it be the very first rapport building, leg, if you want to call it, that works. All right, I'm going to go over this, I'm going to say it, but when we walk in, we're walking into a world of the survivor's culture, vocabulary, and we don't know what's in their background in terms of past abuses. So common ground for me means just being able to say, I'm Wendy, I work for whatever agency I work for, and I'm here for you. Whatever you tell me, if it's privileged, if it's confidential, whatever you have as in your role as being there for them in this role, that's what you state. And then you say, I always get cold in this room. They keep it cold. I keep a couple of extra sweaters in here. Would you care for one? Period. Would you like me to stand here or would you like me to be out of the way? You never touch. You know, sometimes people say, oh, I need to hold your hand. That's fine. You can hold their hands. But that's the very element, that personal, I see you, I hear you, I'm going to acknowledge you, is what's going to be behind this. Because human beings are genetically engineered to survive. That's our biology, that's our chemistry, that's our psychology. And because of the trauma that the survivor has just experienced, they're going to be assessing at each and every situation, moment by moment, person by person, for signs of danger, for threat to their safety, before engaging with those who are supposedly safe. And the supposedly safe is not necessarily going to be you sometimes. Sometimes that supposedly safe is going to be, it could be the first responder, the EMT. It could be the emergency room nurse that they first came in with. You don't know who that is. And whoever that may be, that is totally okay. But they're going to do it. Just don't take it personally. You're there to be fluid with them. Because my very first rule of advocacy is you have one chance at every single second to with the survivor. And what that means is it doesn't matter if you've been working with them in a relationship for a day, a minute, a year. The way trauma works, the survivor, again, is always assessing. And if they think that you're not safe, if you have done something to upset them, they are going to they're going to disengage from you. We're not there to judge. I've made some very bad mistakes. There's an advocate in this field. We were working together. She was a legal advocate. I took this survivor down, and she was very, very soft-spoken. The culture that she came from, it was a Southeast Asian. She was very soft-spoken. She was being very respectful. So she had her head bowed. And the advocate, the legal advocate, said to her, you know how you do, like, come here with your wave, with your hand open and your fingers flexing towards you? Come here, please speak up. And every time the legal advocate did this, the survivor moved backwards until finally, in tears, she left the room. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. And it happened so quickly. I was like, what is going on here? And I had to understand that something was not right. Something was going on. So I called that a culturally specific agency and described what had happened. And they told me that in the culture that this survivor came from, that come here wave is what you do to call the pigs in. So in essence, what the legal advocate was doing was telling the woman that she was a pig. We have to be very careful because that woman never came back to my agency or the other agency. So 2 pillars to support the first rule, my rule of establishing rapport: tell the truth, be respectful. All right. Any questions about this so far? It may be that when I saw the woman and I wasn't fast enough to catch it, backing up, I could have said, we need to stop here, and taken her outside the room, the legal advocate's room, and said, tell me what's going on. How are you feeling? I can see that something is upsetting you. So there you have it. That's all that it takes. I see you. I hear you. I acknowledge you. You know, because we're meeting people who, when they're at their most vulnerable again, their self-agency has been taken away, and more than likely by someone that they know. All right. If we can acknowledge who they are, what we do, what they do, and that, yes, we may offend them, and that's not our intention. We need to be told that so we don't repeat it, and give them that little piece of empowerment back and mean it and say it in a kind and gentle and respectful way. That is okay. Okay? You know, that's all that we need. We also need to listen when we're being respectful, paraphrase back what we hear, and act upon what we hear accordingly after we've checked to make sure that what we have said back is accurate. To look at the survivor when we're saying it back, be able to read whether yes, they are agreeing with that, or no, they're not agreeing with it. And you know, find ways that we can paraphrase back to folks, not the crazy talk we hear, but the gist of what you're hearing, that kernel of truth. I'm not encouraging anyone to be chatty. I'm just encouraging people to come up with words and phrases that fall out of your mouth like water, without being disrespectful, and not inflating or escalating or bringing something back, by using good neutral language. Like if they go that you say perpetrator. You've acknowledged who that perpetrator is, and I can see that you're upset, not that you're so dang angry or whatever they're using. And also for us to understand that when we are being respectful and paraphrasing back, it does not mean that we are agreeing with everyone or what they're saying. We're just responding to what people are saying and doing. Okay. Is that clear? Does anybody have any questions? Because I'm going to move on. All right. These 12 core concepts for understanding traumatic stress is fabulous. And for people who do not know or haven't used this resource, the National Traumatic Child Stress Network, I encourage you all to go there. It's free to join. Their trainings are free. Their information is free. We are not going to go into them, all of them right now. I'm going to use some of them as tools for building rapport. But I think that this is, for today, we're going to use number 1, 2, 7, 10, and 12 of these core principles, which are, we will get there. So we know that the 3 major needs of all victims: to feel safe, to express emotions, and need to know what comes next. I've had people be quiet and they say stuff like, I'll say to them, is there something I can see on their face? And I would say, is there something you would like to say? And I've had people tell me, yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to offend you. And it's, you know what? This is your space. You can say whatever you want. I've heard it all. And then I've proceeded to hear things I've never heard. I'm not a good poker player, but I've learned how to keep my face still. Okay? Introduce yourself by name for people to feel safe. Reassure them that they are safe right now, that they're okay. What's going to happen next? We're going to check for injuries. We can provide you with a pamphlet after the exam is over, your phone number, 2 or 3 or 4 steps that are written. We're not going to overwhelm, because people in crisis are rarely going to remember anything past the 2nd or 3rd step. So let's not overwhelm them with a whole bunch of information. Okay, the first rule of rapport building: keep going. Core concept 1 of the traumatic stress is that each traumatic experience is inherently complex. All right? That means, you ever hear someone say the car wreck, doesn't matter, whatever the traumatic experience was. I know it only lasted no more than 28 seconds, but it felt like 3 hours. Traumatic events are circumscribed, which means, I just lost my train of thought. They are going to be looking at it moment by moment, step by step, and assessing in every single moment, not minute, moment, the degree of danger they're in due to the physical violation that's happening to them or witnessing it happening to someone else. And they're going to figure out, what do I need to do to keep myself alive in this situation? And very often what happens in this situation is they feel ashamed of something they didn't do or they did do. It's a no-win situation for them. It is extremely complex. They're thinking of protective actions at this point, and they're having very conflicting things afterwards about what they should have done, what they shouldn't do. I'm not one of those fast thinkers that when somebody zings me, I can come back with a better zing. I'm the one who can figure out after a while what they can do or can't. No, okay, all right. All right, I'm unmuted. I'm back on. Y'all can hear me now? Okay, great. All right. So, okay, let me go back. So they're trying to figure out what to do, what not to do, the amount of danger that they're in, the degree of complexity often increases in cases of multiple or recurrent trauma exposure, and in situations where a primary caretaker is the perpetrator of the trauma. That can mean somebody who is supposed to be watching over them or have their back, such as a partner or a friend. And because we know that most sexual assaults happen, happen, or a perpetrator is someone who happens to be in their, someone they know, it's a betrayal of trust, regardless of how you cut the cake. So understand this, and that they're going to be trained on you because they're still in that trauma mode to see if you are safe or not. Please remember that when you walk in, this is not a social setting you are walking into. This is very much a trauma setting you are walking into. And so there are certain things that we have to learn to establish rapport. The very first rule of Social Work 101 is meet the client where they are. Okay. All right. Traumatic there. So the thoughts, the actions, the inactions, the fear, the guilt, we did that. The victim's reality is your reality. Okay? I'm going to say things to you like, look, there's the earth. What the hell am I doing here? I need to eat dirt. These are all trauma informed or trauma responses. You don't know what they're saying. The person who said to me, look, there is the earth. It's blue and it's spinning. I learned a long time ago never to argue with people's realities. What I can say to them is, I can paraphrase back. You're looking at the earth and it's blue. Tell me where it is. I don't want to enhance their delusions. I want to ask. And this victim pointed, and from where she was sitting, from her viewpoint, she could see the ambulance light. It wasn't the ambulance, it was the police, and it was that blue light revolving around. And you know what? This happened to be a drug-facilitated sexual assault. She was hallucinating. It's okay, but we need to know that. We can't go in there assumptions. What the hell am I doing here? Maybe that the person had a blackout because they drank too much, or they disassociated to protect themselves. You don't know, and it's not our job to diagnose or to say that they're crazy or to editorialize. What we need to do is just to expect the unexpected. Eating dirt, some people do, some cultures do. For whatever their reasons, it's fine. Others may be withdrawn and not speak. Some may be energized and bouncing off the wall, and some may not accept or believe that they're a victim. It is our job to say, to match them, to respond, to think proactively through what may or may not happen, and be very, very careful in our language and very kind in our language to them, okay? What I used to say to people when they say, I cannot believe this happened to me, or what am I doing here? I used to say to them, you have just been in a traumatic situation. You've been raped. I'm sorry that this happened to you. I'm sorry that we had to meet this way. And I am so in awe of whatever you did to have to sit here and have you talk to me. You must be a really strong, resilient person, changing the dynamic immediately. Okay. All right. I remembered over time that sometimes the survivor didn't understand what I was saying, didn't get in there. What I was saying was whatever it was, but what they got was that tone of voice and that caring was there for them, and that's where they chose to keep re-engaging. Okay. I couldn't find a picture of a smiley face that I liked without it being whatever. You don't want to walk into it. This reminds me of my nieces when they were much younger. They would walk into the room, they're twins together, and they would go, hi, everyone. And it was just, they throw out their arms like they're giving everybody a great big hug. We're not going to a social situation here. You don't want to have a big smile on your face. You don't want to not have a big frown on your face. What you want is to be neutral. And it's not at this time to go over to the forensic examiner and give them a hug, or to the law enforcement person who's there and give them a hug, or smile at them or wave to them. It is our job at that point to treat everybody respectfully and the same as professionals, and to nod, to acknowledge, nod your head, however you do it, hello, whatever you say. That's your style, not the big smile, not the big energy walking into the room. We want to mute ourselves a little bit and do the same thing to the survivor, to be able to sit there and to let them understand that they are on par with someone else. Because, again, we don't know if someone was smiling big to the survivor and that smile didn't reach their eyes and really vile things, words were coming out of their mouth. We don't know that, so we don't want to re-traumatize. And they're just to be open, to be present, and acknowledging in ways that don't really involve smiling. Some people would feel very, very uncomfortable and I agree, Cassandra, with you, that if that person, that exuberance was there. Other people would feel totally uncomfortable if silence was there. So we have to be measured or neutral. And that's the whole point. When we're thinking about this, we need to think about this totally and solely from the survivor's point of view. Okay, second rule. Keep going. This is the second core principle. Where am I going? I don't know this computer. Thank you for being gentle with me today. Okay, the second core rule, it's jumping around and doing stuff. The second core rule, there are intrinsic and extrinsic factors that go into everyone. And when we meet the survivor, we don't know what they are. Intrinsic factors are those deep-seated beliefs about who people are, and they're just built into the person's nature. There's those intrinsic, deep-seated feelings and points of view that we all have. Extrinsic, they're not really the essential part of someone's nature. They're acquired stuff. Like, I have learned to build rapport in many different situations. That's not intrinsic for me. That is an extrinsic factor for me. So there you have it. And all of these experiences meld together and influence the way the survivor behaves and assesses the experience of everything that is happening to them since the moment the abuse started. And it's also their expectations about what their danger is, what their protection is going to be, their safety, and their course of post-traumatic adjustment, all of which we're not privy to at the very beginning. So I like to say that trauma happens within a broad ecology, and it's composed of the intrinsic, and there it is. But extrinsic factors are also adaptive coping skills, if you will. And this is something that advocates can help a survivor with. Third rule, keep going. All right? Keep going. You just keep going. And this is the seventh core concept. This is protective and promotive factors. You're going to hear people tell you that to build rapport, you should establish a very quick snapshot of who the person is. The protective factors that we want to look at can be established pretty quickly, and that means their strengths, their skills, the resources, supports, or coping strategies that they have. They're already indicated to you, but the fact that they are there, something clicked and they were able to survive, something in them. I have always asked, is there someone that you would like me to call? Is there something I can do? Is there a pet? Are there children that need to be picked up from school? Is there something, or, if you're a diabetic, do you need some medication? That kind of stuff that are protective factors that they may not remember in the moment, but tell you that you're paying attention and that they can help you with. That you can do. The promotive factors is that resiliency stuff, that positive development. And we're going to start to move the promotive factors now from, this is not a pathology, this is something about recovery. And they're variables because we're all associate positive development in different ways. It's not a straight trajectory. But once we know what the protective factors are in people's life, there are promotive factors that go along with it, that enhance the protective factors, and the protective factors enhance the promotive factors. And that's about how we can move forward. So the coping skills, the social networks, and you get that when you're talking or having a conversation, the level of self-efficacy that they have, attachment to the community. They may say to you, can you please call my pastor? Or they may say, please call my mom and my best friend, or please don't call my dad. I'm telling you very important information at the start. So that's the way it goes. It's those social connections, the social support that there's there. If someone says to you, no, there's no one you can call, go Don't judge. Don't say, oh, why? What we can say then is, okay, I'm here and I'll do whatever you need me to do. We've told you something important. You just don't know what that important thing is right now. The fourth rule, this is, well, you can see it. We just keep going. We keep building. We keep going forward. And this is that culture is deeply interwoven with traumatic experiences. It's a broad understanding of culture that leads us to realize that everything that a person is and a host of other factors that we don't know about affect the experience. And it's going to affect that trauma, and everything that they are is going to affect their help-seeking behavior, their treatment, and their recovery as they move forward. Okay? What is their culture? What do they need? I have had people tell me, please, I need to be saged. Please call my curandera. You know what? Hospitals may not like that, to have in that system, having somebody being saged inside of a hospital room. However, can you take them outside for 10 or 15 minutes to have, if that's important? Can you talk about that proactively? Because those things never happen. You know, it's always a reactive, I find. But can you talk about that with your SART team beforehand? You know where to stand. You know, we're all involved in this together. We should know these things beforehand. What do we need to do? If someone says they need to eat dirt, can you go outside and bring dirt in and have them? Whatever it is, culture is interwoven, and we have to, as advocates, respect it and support it, because that's going to help them move forward. Okay. And responses. Again, remember, their reality is your reality, and they may make requests that seem weird, but their requests come from their point of view, and that affects the meaning of what happened to them, what's happening to them, and how they're going to recover. Okay? The danger then rests in everybody in the system who is working with the survivor as seeing them as one-dimensional when they are not. Okay? We don't understand this. Often when we go in, who or how or what culture is doing to that survivor. And I'm going to give you, I'm trying to think of an example in my mind, and I'm really thinking of me right now, that if I were a survivor and I was taken in, English is not my first language. Spanish is not my first language. Portuguese is my first language. And if somebody came at me and started talking in English, I would have to translate it into Portuguese and then try to translate it back into English. And it probably, I couldn't code switch fast enough. I'm just thinking that when I get really annoyed, words start falling out of my mouth, but it's not in English, it's in Portuguese. When I'm working with when I was doing direct service work and I was working with a survivor and I couldn't think of the word in Spanish, the first thing that happened, and I was unaware of it, came out in Portuguese, and the survivor would get annoyed with me and angry because all of a sudden they didn't really understand me. And I think I would, if I had to flip that around, that would be the same to me. So I think we need to be very aware of culture, language, how people process things, all that kind of stuff before we move on. Okay. The fifth rule of rapport building, keep going. We're going to do something about nonverbal communication because this is huge. And I cannot stress this enough. practice, practice, practice until nonverbal communication becomes second nature to you. And I mean it. I can't play poker with my family because I have tells, like my face lights up when I have a really good hand, or I think I'm being totally neutral. It's not true, and they know it. So body language that is appropriate, the kind that gives the survivors some agency back, some empowerment, because we're not friends, we're resources. We're a sharing repository of knowledge, local resources, and different systems that exist in our communities. And so we're going to show an open and willing body language. We're not going to sit there with our arms crossed. And if you're sitting there hugging yourself because you're cold, please let the survivor know that you are really cold, and you're standing there. So, and if they're shivering, like I said before, you know, we're actions. Advocacy is about actions, and that's who advocates are. We're about actions. It's cold in here. I'm going to grab me a sweater. Would you like one too? Don't ask if they're cold. If you see them shivering, ask, would you like that? If they say they're not cold, don't argue. Keep going. Get a sweater out. And say anytime you want one, there's 3 or 4 sweaters in here. That's fine. Okay. The body wants to get trauma out of itself as fast as it can. So don't ask to shake someone's hand or someone unless they offer it to you. Some may cry, some may cuss. We're not there to react to it. We're there to do for them. Okay. Okay, not argue, acknowledge, all these things. Nonverbal is persuading, is more than persuading with words. It's about being open and listening. And if you have a professional conflict with your professional peers, take it outside of the room, keep it out of your body language, and do it away from them. So people instantly read and believe what body language says. And if there's a mismatch, they're gonna believe your body language, okay? Advocates also must match the survivor's words like we talked about, but pretty much their countenance as well. So nonverbal communication, we talked about the body language, but it's also the distance, the physical environment or our appearance, our voice and touch. It's very different to talk about things and use our voice either to make it soft or to make it louder. Speaking at a slower rate and speaking clearly, not like you're talking to an idiot or talking to a young child, but just speaking slower and clearer sometimes calms people down, because when people talk rapidly, like I was doing before, sometimes it usually indicates that people are nervous. It indicates that they are thinking very quickly. Or that you want to get this over and done with as quickly as possible. So we want to slow it down. We want to regulate our own breathing, because you know what? If we can have them match our breathing, that's going to calm them down too, because usually when people are in crisis, they're doing very shallow breathing. We want to do some more deep breathing rather than anything else. We don't want to touch anyone, because touch behaviors are very different. Some people are huggers, some people are not. They're going to be touched during the forensic exam. That needs to be explained to them very kindly, very gentle, that their space is going to be invaded for this and that reason. You know, if they want to hold your hand and they grab for it, that's okay. If they say that you want them out of their sight, That's okay too. I managed to be at a distance or an angle where they could not see me, but where I could see them. So that, and I would tell them that I'm going to be out of your visual line. I'm going to be paying attention so that if I see that you're in distress, all you need to do is put your hand up, and I'm going to ask whoever you're working with at the moment to stop and to give us a break. Very different. We want to validate the survivor's thoughts and opinions. We don't have to agree with them. We just have to validate that we hear them. We want to be able to, like I said, match body posture, energy level, and our tone of voice, because that's really, really important when we're establishing rapport. Okay. So we talked about the pitch by lowering it softer and can help with building. Okay. The 6th rule, keep going. This is about managing expectations. And expectations are a set of rules or, something that we have in our mind. But you know what? They're about what exists in the future. They're not about what exists today. What exists today is the surest way to stay in the here and now and to build rapport, because expectations can be hugely disappointing if you think this is going to happen and it doesn't happen immediately. Okay? I personally, when I have an expectation, how I end up getting disappointed because I start thinking about what the future is going to look like. And you know what? That's rarely what happens. So in our work as advocate, we manage survivors' expectations constantly. One of the traps that I have found for me and for the survivor is that we believe that we know what's going to happen next, and what the distinct roles the different other professionals are going to play in this process. And you know what? That's not really accurate. I recommend staying in the here and now and talking about what is coming next. Right now, this is happening. Right now, this is not happening. I'm sorry about that, folks. And so what's next? So when I am asked a direct question, or I hear an expectation, I try to answer as neutrally as possible. Yes, it would be nice if that perp gets caught, and I understand that justice would be good. Please define for me what you think justice should be, or tell me more about justice, or what's going to happen if the perp doesn't get caught? Because I can't guarantee that, because sometimes some things are so egregious that law enforcement has said, we're going to get this guy and we're going to make them pay. That can be kind of comforting sometimes to a survivor, sometimes not, especially if it's someone that they're deeply in love with. And what does justice look like for them? What are the expectations? What does justice look like in the here and now for them? And let's talk about those things when we do that. Or sometimes I just push it off and say, that's a really good question for law enforcement, the forensic examiner, or for the district attorney. I'm going to make a note of it, and I will get back to you with the answer. Or when you meet with them, or we meet with them, I'm happy to, bring it up again. Don't make negative statements or promises that cannot be kept. I know Detective so-and-so, and they're really a good guy. Don't say that. They may be a good guy, but that doesn't mean that they're going to do everything they can. You can make a very general, broad statement about law enforcement is going to take this case. They're going to do everything they can to make this case. All right. You don't need to say, I know Detective so-and-so, and they're really not very good at their job. Let's not throw our people under the bus. Or I'm going to make sure that you get the medical attention that you need, because that's not your job. Your job is to say, if you need medical attention, or when medical issues come up, we will discuss it and find the appropriate resources. That's what I can do, because establishing rapport, again, goes back to telling the truth and being respectful every moment that you are with the survivor. And to tell you the truth, in my estimation, if we as advocates don't establish rapport of some sort, the survivor's safety is in jeopardy, because we're not understanding what their world is like, what their community is like, what their culture is like, and we're not going to make the appropriate referrals or figure out what needs to be done in a more practical way that honors them. It's about safety. Okay. Oh, managing expectations. There are 3 practical tips. Make no assumptions, communicate, and push back gently, please. Push back with the realistic information. All right. Push back. It's the balance their needs with the survivor's needs with what your agency can do, and be open and deliver, and what can be delivered upon, and what the plan to bring the rest on board can go a long way in instilling confidence. Okay. The 7th rule, keep going. All right. Keep going. These are our agency's practices. We've talked about this. I'm going the wrong way. The 7th rule, interwoven. These are practices and traditions that serve many purposes for survivors, or for people in general. They not only help define a community, the practices, they help create a community, and they have healing qualities to them, and that they may help us make connections. They help make connections to their yourself, to your sense of belonging, to anybody's sense of belonging, and to a sense of identity and for purpose. When I was a child, when I was very little, my grandma lived with us, and when anybody got sick, she made lentil soup, and she would sit there at your bedside, and she would have a bunch of lemons or limes, and she would squeeze a drop or 2 into the spoon and gently feed it to you. That to me represents nurturing. Anytime any of my children or anybody that I love, my sisters, my nieces, my nephews, my good friends, my partner gets sick, I make lentil soup and I sit at the bedside, and I squeeze it. And for me, it gives me a lot of comfort to know that I'm connecting. I feel like with my grandma. I also feel like I'm reaffirming that person's worth to me, that person who is ill. And I think that's what practices and communities do. They pull us together. Okay, I think about the displaced victims of Hurricane Katrina, who described the breakdown of their social fabric after they moved to different communities and away from New Orleans. The losses that they experienced, the social displacement, their notion of safety and routine and trust in a stable environment, nostalgia for their neighborhoods. We saw this not only in the adults, but the children as well. And they were, it was hard for them. And then they had to reinitiate a process reestablishing security whether or not they returned to New Orleans, that was different and new. And they had such intangible losses sometimes, they couldn't even talk about it. It is the same thing for the victims of rape. When our survivors come in, they're going to have to reestablish their community, redevelop, recover from trauma. Because I know one of the things that most of the survivors I talked about said, everybody's going to now see me through the lens of being a rape survivor. Okay. Rituals, again, can be alternative medicine, but they're also traditional, rooted in a spiritual or a religious practice, and they involve a wide range of materials depending on the culture, and many can be used to be treated. However it's used, this could be dance, this could be storytelling, this could be creating art. For some cultures, it can be wailing or keening. In others, it's going deep into yourself, guided meditation with someone in your community. It's not our place to judge. It's our place to affirm and to help the survivor move forward. And so establishing rapport means I will help you the best I can with these cultural practices and rituals as long as I know about them. The 8th rule, keep going. Just keep going. And this is a 12th. Working in this field, I'd be remiss if I don't bring it up, can evoke distress in the providers. We witness traumatic events, adversities, which evoke distress and make it more difficult to provide good care. If we are not taking good care of ourselves, we are not able to take good care of people around us. And that's just really not a happy thing. So strategies for ourselves are the same strategies that we give to our survivors. We need to have hope, and we cannot live with mistrust or skew our perceptions. We need to get time away from work in positive ways and finding things in the world that give us balance outside of work. For me, that means not hanging out with my fellow peer professionals. That means finding a book club that wants to read the classics and not murder mysteries. For me, that means working in the garden, whatever it means to you, crocheting, knitting, dancing, something that gives you joy, something that builds up your worth. And we're doing the same, we suggest the same things for survivors because we want to have good self-esteem. We don't want to live in fear, and we don't want to be inadequate. So how do we as advocates find the support that we need and the trauma-informed supervision or the trauma-informed agencies that support us? If you're in you have a clinical license, how do you get that in your clinical supervision? How do you make sure that everyone on staff feels comfortable and safe doing their jobs? How do we review policies and procedures at our agencies to see how they connect and support the employees, their families? And if we're doing that for our employees and our families, our survivors and their families are going to feel that as well. And that's going to be good. And we need to know that security comes from different places. And it's usually about having clear expectations and policies in our job roles. And agencies that support survivors and advocates are going to be the agencies that provide the security. Okay. All righty. And the connection, those ties. You know what, guys? We do the impossible. Professionally, we do the impossible. We maintain connections, we keep learning, we keep training, we keep finding new resources, we keep being stretched, we keep going, we keep growing, and we are mighty because of what we do. Okay. And that is really important to remember. We're super people. So this is, we attempt this. I'm not always sure that I like this, but I want us to remember that the ways to keep going is forget the noun, do the verb. I love that one. You are allowed to challenge your mind, expand it every day, do something that brings you joy every day. Advocates do the impossible. We are always doing it. So here are some ways to build rapport. Before we go on to building rapport, about creating a comfortable environment is snapshots. We talked about that, projecting calm, but creating a comfortable environment. Magic phrases are, I'm so sorry this happened to you, and mean it. How can I help and mean it? Is there someone I can call and mean it, not just for you, but for your fellow peer professionals? Fear is not knowing. It's scary not knowing, and knowledge is pretty special thing to have. In some of the AA traditions, they say that fear is merely an acronym, and it stands for false events appearing real. How about that for managing expectations? Okay. There are also challenges, and you can read this, summarize, create that. So that some of the challenges for dual or multi service agencies is a limited trainings that people in the agency get. And that means that sometimes supervisors or directors can get the training, but the people who are doing the direct services where rubber meets the road, they are not getting those kinds of training, or there's limited staff. And so this is why it's so important, we feel at TAASA, to record the webinars, but to also not just go online and look at what we have, but WISCAP, the Washington Coalition of Sexual Assault programs, and Casa, the California Coalition, and the National Child Stress and EVAWI, the End Violence Against Women. Look for websites that actually have it. Northwest Coalition, they inform me forward. These are all great agencies that have recorded webinars that are for free. And they're fabulous. Look at them, see with them. Sometimes it's the lack of outreach and education to the community, because these are challenges, because there aren't enough people to do it, especially in rural areas where people and resources can be stretched really thin, or because if we are a dual agency or we're doing other things in our agency, we're focused on other crimes as well. All right. And so if we're doing so much, we're doing a one size fits all model, and that doesn't serve us well. Okay. So I want to say, think about this for a moment. If the survivor says, this is frustrating, you don't believe me anyway, what do you say? What's going on here? How do you validate? How do you show interest in what's being said? And how do you ask open-ended questions to say that this is something that you understand, or something that's being to show that you are engaged? I want you to think about that for a minute. And if you're comfortable, can you please chat in something so that we have some takeaways here? Because I can give you what I would do, but I'm not the total expert here. And as you're thinking and writing this, I will go on. What I don't think is a good thing to do is to respond with silence, be defensive or distant, interrupt people when they're talking to me. I do interrupt from time to time, and I'm going to take that back because every so often there is a survivor who is wound up and they're going on and on and on and on and on, and there's some information I need to have. When they take a breath, I interrupt with what I call a close-ended question. Close-ended means that there's only one possible answer to give. What's your middle name? How is it that, will you be home at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning so we can I can check on you? That's it. Okay, right. I want to help you. I understand. Right. That's how I do with I understand this is frustrating. I do believe you. Help me understand what you're saying. Those are the things we can say. Tell me more. I want to help. That's fabulous. Thank you, Becca. Because these are things Jessica. I didn't see Jessica's. Okay, let's see. What did you say, Jessica? Understand this. I do believe you. Help me. Yeah, because that's exactly, that's exactly what I'm really sorry. I sent the message that I do believe you. I absolutely believe you. And I'm sorry, I do believe you. We can make apologies, but I think the apologies, I would be careful with saying, wow, that's not what I intended to put out there. Let's go back. Let's say this again, okay? We don't want to provide personal opinion or advice. We just need to be thoughtful, just very thoughtful about what we're saying. We don't want to make condescending statements. We don't want to ask, this gets confusing. I know I have been in interviews where they sat me down. I remember this one agency, and they sat me down, and it was a U shape. They had the tables in a U shape, and they had me sit in the middle, and they were asking a question and then a question, and then all of a sudden I was bombarded with like 5 questions at once, 2 of them in Spanish and 3 of them in English, and I was just so totally taken aback that I was like, whoa. And so, I don't want that happening to our clients, our survivors. What I'd like to see is for us to ask, if we have 4 or 5 questions, great. Let's go one question at a time, get the answer, move forward. And let's not be aggressive. Let's just go, okay, can you tell me more about that? And if they say no, is that done? Are you okay to move? Another question I like to ask, you want to take a break? Is there a break? Do we need to get some water? Whatever it is. Right. Help me understand what you're going through. Amber, that's great. Thank you. I do not understand exactly what you're going through. I see you're frustrated. Help me understand. And that help me understand is so powerful because that's about giving people back some agency. What do you need in this moment? It's so powerful to hear that, so comforting. I never ask my family when they're sick if they want lentil soup. It made that oh God, this is what he does. It would be probably better for me to say to them, and thank you all for this. What do you need in the moment? What can I do for you? Because me feeding them lentil soup makes me feel better, not them feel better. See that? We need to help each other here. So I thank you for all of that. And I think basically we all have big hearts and we're all on the same page. Want everything. One more thing I want to say. It's our duty to know the boundaries of our jobs, of our roles, of our agencies, and what our agencies can and cannot do. and to stay in our lane. It is not my job to tell the investigators how they need to investigate. It is not the job of the forensic nurse to be an advocate. It is not the job of law enforcement to tell criminal justice how they're going to prosecute this case. That is not what we do. Told me a long time ago, we're not on the same page. We're all chapters in the same novel. We want the best outcome possible inside of our rules for, he said the victim, and that's what legally, that's what law enforcement calls survivors. So we all want that. We have to figure out where it is. So that's what we need to do. That's what we need to see in our jobs and our roles. And that's how we do that. Okay. Give factual information, summarize important points, let people, give them the opportunity, check back with them. Help me to understand. I understood it this way. And I need to understand if I'm understanding this correctly. Avoid irrelevant information. They don't need to know that it's cats and dogs tone of voice. These are things that they don't know. Correcting misconceptions about what's going to happen next is huge. Oh, you're just going to find a way home. You have to stay for tonight. We're going to help you find housing down the road. What is it that you need? Where do you want to stay? So give factual stuff and what we can do. If it's not your job to find clothing, housing, the person who, the advocate who does that is there. Know who your counterparts are. Magic words, as y'all were putting out there. How can I help? Is there someone I can call? Help me understand. I'm sorry this happened to you. What more do you know? Is there anything more that I can do for you? Anything more I can do? These are magic words. Create your own, like I said, that fall out of your mouth like water. You don't, it's just that gentle. I always think of it when I say falling out of your mouth like water. I'm sorry, that is a translation and an idiomatic. It's like falling out of your mouth like a waterfall. Soft, gentle, you know, cleansing. Okay, what can I do? Rapport is a matter of safety. You know, we don't want to place anybody's life at risk. And some of the techniques that you can implement to increase your capacity to build rapport is huge. Take this back with you, please, to your other advocates that you work with, your professional peers, to your agencies. What do you do? What do you believe? I don't like this term best practices, but I understand that there are things out there. I did this training because people challenged me to do it. I would love to see other advocates in the field step up, step back, and say, this is what we found. And we want to do a webinar on this because this is what we're seeing and this is what works. I'm not doing the direct service work anymore. I'm doing the research, and I'm happy to pull it all together, and I'm happy to support you. Yeah, take a deep breath. I'm here from you. We'll take this journey together. These are wonderful, Nancy, and I thank you for that. Okay. Create an environment. It has been proven, I have seen the research, that witnesses are less to report false information if they're in a comfortable environment and they feel like they're being treated with respect and we're paying attention, and they haven't heard law enforcement or anyone on the spectrum of first providers, emergency providers on up, talking about their case. Because many times the way trauma works, people don't remember. They're desperately searching to fill in the gaps. That is what we need here, to have them fill in the gaps. Okay, we don't want them to do that. So if they feel comfortable, they feel like they're being believed, we're not asking what I call leading questions, like, are you sure you remember it that way? Where they go, okay, they don't believe me, so either I'm going to shut up or they're looking for something that, so I'll give them something they can believe. They'll do that. Let's be careful with that. Challenges we talked about that. Questions, comments, suggestions, anything that you want to add to this. This is a time and space for it. Okay, you can chat it in. And while you're thinking about that and while you're chatting it in, I'm going to put up the post test. And if you can please see that, you should screen my screen so that you don't see that. Let me take this down. Okay, y'all. Well, thank you. In about an hour, you will receive the training. The follow-up email. And in that follow-up email, you will have the post test, the link to the certification. And I thank you for your attendance and time today. Thank you so much. Let's see if we can get this launched. There we go. Thank you so much. Oh, crap.